Jacen Solo stood with his father outside the mud-block refugee hut they were sharing on Duro. Under the translucent gray dome that protected Settlement 32 from the planet's ruined atmosphere, tension wrapped around him like a Jacen glass snake, invisible but so palpable through the Force that he could almost feel its coils constrict. Something was about to happen. He could feel it coming when he listened through the Force. Something vital, but what? A Rin female, velvet-furred with a spiked mane, her tail and forearm bristles graying with age, stood talking to Jacen's dad, Han Solo.
"Those are our caravan ships,"
she bellowed, waving her hands.
"Ours!"
She snorted, and the breath wonked through 4 holes in her chitinous beak. Han swung around, narrowly missing Jacen with his left arm. "And right at this moment, we can't afford to take them off-world to run systems checks. You've been in a restricted area, Metza." Splashes of red-orange fur highlighted Metza's soft taupe coat. Her blue tail tip trembled, a gesture Jacen had learned to interpret as impatience.
"Of course we've been in the ship lot,"
she snapped.
"There's never been a security fence Rin couldn't get inside, and those are our caravan ships, ours."
She tapped her chest.
"And don't tell me to trust you, Captain. We do. It's Selcor we don't trust. Selcor and the people up there."
She waved her arms skyward. Jacen's dad could sympathize with refugees making unofficial reconnaissances, especially on board their own ships. But Han was in charge now. Instead of showing his amusement, he was supposed to enforce Selcor regulations. Publicly, at least. Jacen watched the show, trying to pick up one more piece of the puzzle he felt in every cell of his being. Trained as a Jedi and unusually perceptive, he could tell that the Force was about to move, to shift. This time, he didn't dare miss the clues. He leaned against his hut's outer wall and stared out over his new home in Settlement 32. The synth-blast dome had been engineered by Selcor, the New Republic Senate Select Committee for Refugees, to hold 1,000 settlers. Naturally, 1,200 had been squeezed in. Besides these outcast Rin, there were several hundred desperate humans, delicate Vors, Vouvrians with their enormous round heads, and one young Hutt. And the relentless Yuuzhan Vong kept sweeping across the galaxy, destroying whole worlds, enslaving or sacrificing planetary populations. If the Yuuzhan Vong could be stopped, the New Republic hadn't figured out how. Han stood with his left hand on his hip, arguing with Metza, who led the larger of 2 Rin clan remnants. Han had chased the Rin over half the New Republic, trying to gather his new friend Droma's invasion-scattered clanmates. As world after world closed its doors to refugees, the Rin had been beggared, duped, and betrayed. They'd taken terrible losses. They needed a sponsor. So a reluctant Han Solo registered with the burgeoning Select Committee for Refugees. Just long enough to settle them someplace. That was how he explained it to Jacen, anyway. Jacen had fled here from Coruscant. 2 months ago, the New Republic had called him and his brother, Anakin, to Centerpoint Station, the massive hyperspace repulsor and gravity lens in the Corellian system. There'd been hope that Anakin, who had activated Centerpoint once before, could enable it again. Military advisors had hoped to lure the Yuuzhan Vong into attacking Corellia, and they meant to use Centerpoint as an interdiction field to trap the enemy inside Corellian space and then wipe them out. The New Republic might never recover from the catastrophe that followed. Jacen could see stress in his dad's lined face and in the gray growing into his hair. Standing on the beaten dust lane outside the Solo's hut, Metza's opposing clan leader, Romani, twisted his own tail between strong hands. "So your clan," Han said, pointing at Romani, "thinks your clan," pointing now at Metza, "is likely to hijack our transport ships and strand everybody else here on Duro. Is that it?" Someone at the back of Romani's group shouted, "I wouldn't put it past them, Solo." Han stuck his hands into his dusty coverall pockets and caught Jacen's glance. Jacen could almost look him in the eye nowadays. "Any suggestions?" Han muttered. But just at that moment, Jacen collapsed, his chest flashing with fire as if he'd been torn open. His legs burned so fiercely he could almost feel hot shrapnel. The pain blasted down his legs, then into his ears. Jaina? He wondered. Joined through the Force even before they were born, he and Jaina had always been able to tell when the other was hurt or afraid. But for him to sense her over the distances that lay between them now, she must have been terribly. The pain winked off. "Jaina," he whispered, appalled. "No!" He stretched out toward her, trying to find her again through the Force. "Jacen." A voice seemed to echo in his mind, but it wasn't Jaina's. It was deep, male, vaguely like his uncle's. Making an effort, Jacen imagined his uncle's face, trying to focus on that echo. An enormous white vortex seemed to spin around him. It pulled at him, drawing him toward its dazzling center. What was going on? Then he saw his uncle, robed in pure white, half turned away. Luke Skywalker held his shimmering lightsaber in a diagonal stance, hands at hip level, point high. "Jaina!" Jacen shouted the words in his mind. "Uncle Luke, Jaina's been hurt!" Then he saw what held his uncle's attention. In the dim distance, but clearly in focus, a second form straightened and darkened. Tall, humanoid, powerfully built, it had a face and chest covered with sinuous scars and tattoos. Its hips and legs were encased in rust-brown armor. Claws protruded from its heels and knuckles, and an ebony cloak flowed from its shoulders. The alien held a coal-black, snake-headed amphistaff across its body, mirroring the angle of Luke's lightsaber, pitting poisonous darkness against verdant light. The alien swung its amphistaff. The Jedi Master's lightsaber blazed, swept down, and blocked the swing, brightening until it washed out almost everything else in the vision. The Yuuzhan Vong's amphistaff seemed darker than any absence of light, a darkness that seemed alive but promised death. The broad spinning disk on which they both stood slowed. It focused into billions of stars. Jacen picked out the familiar map of known space. Luke dropped into a fighting stance poised near the galaxy's center, the deep core. He raised his lightsaber and held it high near his right shoulder, pointing inward. From 3 points of darkness beyond the rim, tattooed assailants advanced. More of them? Jacen realized this was a vision, not a battle unfolding in front of him, with little or nothing to do with his twin sister. The galaxy seemed to teeter, poised between light and darkness. Luke stood close to the center, counterweighing the dark invaders. But as their numbers increased, the balance tipped. "Uncle Luke!" Jacen shouted. "What should I do?" Luke turned away from the advancing Yuuzhan Vong. Looking to Jacen with somber intensity, he tossed his lightsaber. It flew in a low humming arc, trailing pale green sparks onto the galactic plain. Eyeing the advancing horde, Jacen felt another enemy tried to seize him. Anger from deep in his heart. Fear and fury focused his strength. If he could, he would utterly destroy the Yuuzhan Vong and all they stood for. He opened a hand, stretched out his arm, and missed. The Jedi weapon sailed past him, shrinking and dimming with distance. Now the galaxy tipped more quickly. A dark, deadly tempest gathered around the warriors. Disarmed, Luke stretched out both hands. First he, then his enemies, swelled to impossible sizes. Instead of human and alien figures, now Jacen saw light and darkness as entirely separate forces. Even the light terrified him in its grandeur and majesty. The galaxy seemed poised to plunge toward evil, but Jacen couldn't help staring at the fearful light, spellbound, burning his retinas. A voice like Luke's, but deeper, shook the heavens. "Jacen," it boomed, "stand firm." The horizon tilted farther. Jacen lunged forward, determined to lend his small weight to Luke's side, to the light. He misstepped. He flailed for Luke's hand, but missed again, and again his weight fell slightly toward the dark enemies. Luke seized his hand and held tightly. "Hang on, Jacen," the voice said. The slope steepened under their feet. The Yuuzhan Vong warriors scrambled forward. stars extinguished under clawed enemy feet. Plainly, the strength of 100-odd Jedi couldn't keep the galaxy from falling to this menace. One misstep could doom everyone they'd sworn to protect. No military force could stop this invasion because it was a spiritual battle. And if one pivotal person fell to the dark side, or even used the ravishing, terrifying power of light in a wrong way, then this time everything they knew might slide into stifling darkness. Again he heard the voice. "Stand firm, Jacen." One of the Yuuzhan Vong leapt toward him. Jacen gasped and flung out both arms, and grabbed a flimsy bedsheet. He lay on his back, on a cot, under a corrugated blue synthplas roof. "Junior," another familiar voice drawled. "Hey there. Glad you could join us." Jacen looked up into his father's wry half-smile. Worry lines crowded Han's eyes. Behind him, the Rin-named Droma clutched and twisted his soft red and blue cap, and his long mustachios drooped. "What happened?" Han looked befuddled. "Hit your head on the way down? Skinny here." Droma pointed at a 21B medical droid and finished Han's sentence. "Wants to dump you into the Bacta tank." Han swung toward his friend. "Listen, Bristleface, when I want to say something, I'll say it." "Jaina," Jacen managed. The back of his skull throbbed in rhythm with his pulse. He almost opened his mouth to describe what he'd seen, but he hesitated. If the fate of billions rested on a balance point so narrow that one misstep could doom everyone, did he dare even mention his vision until his own path seemed clear? "What?" his father demanded. "What about Jaina?" Jacen squeezed his eyes shut. "What is it that you want me to do?" he begged the unseen force. "We've got to contact Rogue Squadron," Jacen blurted. "I think she's been hurt."